Okay, good afternoon. I'll call the meeting of Ag Planning to order. First thing is we need to accept the minutes from July 21st. Do I have a motion to accept the minutes? Moved by Jay, seconded by Jim. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. And our discussion today is going to be based around the IDA. So, Kara Elias, if you'd like to give us an overview of the IDA, would be appreciated.
Okay. Hello, everyone. Hope you're having a good afternoon. David asked me to join the meeting today to provide a kind of an update of the IDA, you know, what our authorities are, what we can do, where we've received those authorities from. I'll give a brief overview, and then if anyone has any questions for me, questions that anyone has, I'm happy to try to answer those as well. So the Warren and Washington IDA was created under General Municipal Section 890-C. They were created pursuant to state law by the state legislature and to remain in effect in perpetuity unless there's some caveats as no outstanding projects or something along those lines. They serve at the pleasure, the members serve at the pleasure of both Warren and Washington counties. They're authorized to have a board consisting of not less than 6, but no more than members. And those members, as I said, are appointed by the County of Warren and the County of Washington. Over the years, that's been a split. Each county has appointed 5 members from their respective county. So the authorities that the IDA has are also set out in General Municipal Law, mostly Article 18. The types of projects that an IDA can undertake are fairly broad. Specifically, the projects can be manufacturing, warehousing, research, commercial, industrial, recreation projects, cultural facilities, continuing care retirement communities, and anything that would fall into those particular categories. Traditionally, when an application is received by the IDA and it's reviewed on a cost benefit analysis basis, so which means the IDA reviews the project requests that consist of what types of tax abatements the project is seeking, and I'll get into those in a moment. But what the application requires is for the company to provide total cost of their project, provide information on employment, provide information on the number of employees and the estimated salaries of those particular employees. Then the IDA does an analysis based on the benefits that the company is bringing to the community versus the benefits that the IDA would potentially be offering to them. So the types of abatements that the IDA can authorize are, generally speaking, the pilot, which I think probably everyone is familiar with that. That is a payment in lieu of taxes. It is based on your real property taxes. The way this works is that obviously each property has an existing assessed value. The pilot is based on the improvements that project will create. So for instance, if the project comes to a community and it has a assessed value, it's vacant land and it has an assessed value of $100,000, but the estimated project cost is to be $5 million. The pilot is based on the difference between the current assessed value, the end assessed value. So the project will always be required to pay whatever taxes are being particular property. Special assessment taxes such as fire taxes, water, sewer, those are paid 100%. Those are not eligible for any sort of abatement by pilot agreement. So, and sometimes you'll see that there's more discussion on a particular project that might already have an accessible improvement on it, because sometimes when an applicant comes to the IDA, it isn't clear, well, may not be beneficial for a particular applicant to seek a pilot on a project that already has an accessible improvement. If they're just making some sort of interior changes, minor changes like that, it might not be a benefit to them, because the pilot is only on the increase in the accessible improvement on a particular project. Our standard pilot is based on, for manufacturing projects, it's 100% abatement on the new improvements for the first 5 years, and then 50% on the second 5 years. For other eligible and approved projects, it's 50% abatement for the first 5 years, and then 25% for the second 5 years. The policy also includes a provision that allows the applicant to apply for an enhanced pilot. Those terms are not described. It would be something that the applicant sent to us for approval and along those lines. The other two types of abatements the IDA can provide are a mortgage tax abatement, exemption, so to speak. That's on any of the financing that they do for the particular project. So at the time of the project, taking out a construction loan or a loan for the purchase, then that mortgage would be exempt from mortgage tax when it is filed on record. The third abatement is sales tax, a sales tax exemption. That's on material associated with the construction of the project. So they would get an exemption based on the amount that they have indicated to us at their application of the amounts that would be eligible, that they believe would be eligible for the exemption. And that's an exemption from state and local sales tax. So those are the three primary benefits that the IDA can provide. The IDA can also do tax exempt bonds. This is done through the same transaction and the same process that I just explained. In recent years, it hasn't really been as popular because the interest rates have been considerably lower in recent years. So the issuance of a bond issuance is quite expensive with legal fees, the bond issuance fee through the state. And so sometimes it doesn't work out from a cost benefit analysis on the company's end. It doesn't make much sense if they can get traditional financing at a lower rate. I'm not sure what other topics, Dave, is there anything else you wanted me to specifically speak to?
I think there's a couple areas you may want to touch on.
Okay.
There are some areas like opportunity zones and empire zones. Could you touch on those and what differences they are in certain terms of the policy?
So,
I think you also want to touch on the IDA park.
okay. Dave mentioned the empire zones. The difference between a project located in an empire zone and not located in an empire zone is that, well, IDAs can approve retail projects in a community so long as certain criteria is met. The criteria has to be that you're bringing a good or service that's otherwise not available to the community. It's a tourist destination for the community, bringing people outside of the generally economic development area, which is a defined term in state law. Or the third piece being if it's in an economic, a former empire zone. So if the project meets any or all of those criterias, then retail projects can be undertaken by the IDA. If they don't meet any of that criteria, then they're not eligible for IDA benefits or programs. Dave mentioned that the IDA has an industrial park. That park is in Kingsbury. There are, obviously, as you know, there's projects that are already out there that have that are currently under IDA programs or have completed their IDA program. And there's lots that remain available for sale. Those properties are subject to a declaration of covenants and regulations that are on file in the county clerk's office that govern what types of projects are eligible for that particular park. And so the IDA has the ability to work with a company on promoting a project within that park, separate and distinct from the program. So it's separate and distinct from applying for the application. So a company could purchase a lot in the park and not seek any benefits from the IDA. The company could also do both. They could seek benefits from the park. So there's a little bit of a distinction there as to whether or not it's not necessarily a requirement that they seek any benefits from the IDA. They could simply decide to purchase the property within the park for their own use, so long as it complied with the covenants and restrictions.
Anybody have any specific questions? Dana Half?
Eric, can you tell me the difference between a basic pilot and enhanced pilot? Where does one end and one begin? Is a basic pilot up to 15 years and enhanced is 15 and longer? Where is that cutoff?
So uniform tax exempt policy indicates that a pilot is for 10 years. If it's a manufacturing project, the exemption is 100% for 5 years and 50% for the second 5 years. If it's outside of the scope of manufacturing, it's 50% for 5 years and 25% for 5 years. The policy itself does not define specific enhanced policies. This is something that the applicant would come to suggest, and they would have to provide a basis for their request. Oftentimes, most often you see the request be for a longer period of time, and they base that on their projected revenues and expenses. So that anything outside of the scope of anything outside of a 10-year scope would be enhanced, and any sort of structure by percentage outside of the scope I just mentioned would also be considered enhanced. So
Okay,
if a company,
I have a follow-up if you don't mind.
yeah, sure.
Okay, so under the enhanced, an enhanced, like you said, could be a 5-year if there is outside of that regular defined scope. So my question is, enhanced pilot, is it a New York State requirement that the town must approve or must deny? Or is that an IDA requirement about where the town must give approval or not? I've heard it both ways. I've heard that it's not really a state law, it's just IDA rule.
Correct. That is it's not a state requirement. That is particular to this particular IDA. Warren Washington has indicated that there's an opportunity for towns to pre-approve, if you will, the pilots coming into their particular community. The state law only requires that the IDA reach out and get the input from the respective municipalities with respect to the pilots.
All right, so the IDA, the Warren and Washington IDA, could, through their own policy, do away with the requirement of town approval.
If that the legal question being posed to me, I think that the answer to that question is yes, as far as what general municipal law requires of an IDA.
Thank you.
If I could jump in for a second, I just wanted to say about enhanced pilots. I don't remember many enhanced pilots in Warren, Washington 98. The one that I do remember is Irving Corporation. I think that they had a structure of payments that was negotiated, and I think that pilot went over a course of 20 years, but that was very specific. That's the only one that I know of. I'm sure there was others, but I don't know of any others.
Dana Hogan?
Market 32 was actually another one too, Dave. Hey, Kara, thank you for showing up today. And I was wondering if you could do me a favor and explain how the IDA makes money, if you would. And if you could, use the example that you gave of the $100,000 piece of property that has a $5 million development completed on it.
Okay, so when you just want to clarify, makes money for or generates income, or?
Yep. How does the IDA generate revenue?
Okay, so the way in that particular example, the way that project would work is that if there's $100,000 are required assessment on the project or on the property, the company would continue to pay the $100,000, the tax on the $100,000. They would pay whatever amount was being assessed to their improvement. So if it was a manufacturing project, the company would not pay any additional tax above and beyond what's required on that $100,000 piece until year 5 or year 6. And then in year 6, they would be required to pay 50% of the tax based on the assessment, that the increase in the project cost. So they'd pay tax on 50% of what it would be assessed to the $5 million. So the argument is that, companies may or may not be able to finance their project without some sort of assistance and available and from the community or just in general. So we have, smaller businesses that come, they indicate that they really need this to make their numbers work at the end. So if you're looking at it from a competitive structure as being in one community versus another, if one community is able to offer, and I don't mean one community because there's rules about that, from bringing a project from one community in the state to the other by not competing that way. But if you have, for instance, that might be looking to go to Connecticut and they're getting a certain benefit package there, it might make more sense for them to come to this particular community. That's one way to look at it. Another, that, some of these projects just may or may not be able to happen without some sort of assistance. And that's a personal opinion as how you feel about, whether or not appropriate or not, but that is the way. So, and also from the IDA's perspective, on a project, they receive an administrative fee, and that's based on the purchase price. So most of the projects that have come before or not purchase price, I'm sorry, the total project cost. So that's another line item in the application, that if the project is up to $10 million, that administrative fee is 3/4%. And then it's like a sliding scale after that. Like the next 5 million, it's like 1/2 of that, 1/2 of 1% of the next 10 million. Or most of the projects fall within the $10 million and below range.
Did
So
I clarify it for you, Dana?
Well, so at the very end, it seemed like there was a brief discussion on the administrative fee. So the administrative fee is on the purchase price. How about the pilots? Is there any?
I don't want to, not on the purchase. Sorry, I just want to clarify that. It's not on the purchase price. I misspoke. It's on the project cost. So if their purchase price of the property is, say they're buying the property for $50,000 vacant land, the project is $5 million, the purchase price is the project cost, the administrative fee is going to be on $5,050,000, the total project cost as they identify it.
Okay, so that can be a significant number. That sounds like, correct?
Yeah, could be. Mm-hmm.
So Kara, would you explain that, how the property is handled over the course of the pilot process? There's a
So-
certain format that takes place. It used to be we own the properties, but then you changed that.
Right. So the way the project structure works is that the IDA would, the company would lease its property to the IDA. The IDA leases it back, and that satisfies the state requirement for jurisdiction and control over the property, which is the legal requirement to allow for any of the pilot programs, sales tax, mortgage tax, etc. During the course of that time, the company is required each year to report annually on job numbers. They're required to report on sales tax exemptions. The sales tax exemption usually is it's only for the period of construction, but that usually is a maximum of 18 months typically, unless the company comes for an extension. And of course, we've had companies come for extensions before. So they are required to report to us. We're required to report that information in our annual report to the state. The IDA is also required to have an annual audit that is reported to New York State as well. So there's ongoing compliance with respect to the properties, and the information is needed from the companies. And then sometimes us during the course of their project, they want to expand, they want to see if they're eligible for an expansion, etc.
So in effect, the IDA, when they have a project like this, is responsible for the property over the terms that, to some extent, over the term that pilot project, 10 years or whatever it may be.
Right. So over the course of the pilot program, so the taxing jurisdictions reach out to us, provide the information on the tax rates. That information is then calculated. The tax bills then go out. We're required to be sure that all the companies are paying their pilot payments and submitted appropriately.
Any other questions? Is there any other IDA topics you'd like to discuss? Matt?
Well, I think
Oh, I'm sorry, Dan.
It's not so much a question as a comment, and I think I'd like all the supervisors to be aware of it. And I know there's been some discussion about an educational campaign for the supervisors, and I think Washington County was specifically cited as needing the educational campaign. One thing I am concerned about with the IDA is the inherent conflict that occurs. At a recent meeting, they had a Kingsbury resident who came up to the podium. He indicated a concern about a project that was occurring within the IDA park that did not, in his opinion, and in mine to some degree as well at this point, it didn't fit the parameters of what the IDA should be doing. By providing the IDA with the authority, and I should say, I guess it's the authority granted by the state of New York, to essentially deem what projects that they want to take on with input from the towns. They don't necessarily have to have the approval of the towns if they choose to ever change their policy. And as I understand it, I believe there's roughly 9 or 10 towns in Washington County right now that don't have that input option available to them. And I would encourage all of you to perhaps look into that. In that they can take on these projects, receive an administrative fee on the project, and really not take the input of the town. They can listen to them, but they don't have to really take that advice and move forward and make the decision whichever way they want. I'm really troubled by what I've learned just in the last month or two about the authority that they have over some of the towns in Washington County. So I would encourage you all just to make sure you're aware of what can transpire specific to some projects, even though they may not necessarily fit in the IDA park, because it does seem at times that they also have the authority to address their covenants to make a project fit, even though it wouldn't necessarily fit what their guidelines and policies and procedures would normally state. So thanks, Kathy.
Matt, did you want to go next?
I was going to change topics unless Dana wanted to jump in and piggyback on the same topic.
Dana Haff. You got to unmute Dana.
Thank you. Piggyback on what Dana Hogan said. in my town in Hartford, we have a real concern about what we feel could possibly be in the future. Intrusions into the town's right to self-determination. Now, the uniform tax abatement policy, anything that has the word abatement in it means you pay less. So we have a concern here. We recently in the town adopted a resolution, sent it to the IDA to join what I call the 1999 list, which says that there will be no pilots in the town of Hartford without the town board approving, town board. I'm wondering why not, there's other taxing jurisdictions, school districts. I don't have a village, but it could be a village. But my main concern is that now I'm hearing that especially even on the enhanced pilot, I thought we had protection because an enhanced pilot must come before the town as per New York state law. But Kara, you say it's all policy of the IDA. I have a fear through amendment of the IDA's own policy, they could act to intrude upon a town's home rule. And this is why it's very incumbent upon the appointing body, Washington County Board of Supervisors, Warren County Supervisors, that we appoint people who will listen to us and not intrude upon our home rule. Thank you.
Okay, Matt?
Yeah, I had two topics, and the first one, I think probably is gonna skip Kara a little bit, but after the chairman removed the resolution on Friday, Warren County has nominated and approved Michael Grasso to join the IDA. I believe they sent that to us, and we needed to approve it from this end. And my point to the chairman was it needs to go through committee and go through the process and not just, show up an hour before the meeting. So to get that ball rolling, since they've sent it to us, I'm gonna make a motion that we appoint Mike Grasso so we can start discussion and move it to the full board and make it happen or not make it happen, however it's gonna happen. So I'm gonna make that motion to ratify the Warren County's, not nomination, but appointment.
And I'll apologize to Dana Haff. He sent a text message to me asking me to invite Mike Grasso to come to this meeting to be interviewed, but since I only got the message as I was getting into the car at approximately noon to head up this way, there was nothing I could do about that. So, but there's a resolution on the floor. Does anybody want to second that?
I'll second that.
Seconded by Brian. Further discussion? Dana?
I have,
Both Danas, but Dana Haff is first.
So Cassie, you're saying that because of a calendar, we will not have an opportunity to see face to face and ask questions to whomever
I'm
Warren
saying-
County nominates.
My
think-
comment was that I was out of town and didn't get your request until this
But-
morning when I was getting in the car.
So have another meeting. This is too important to just say, oh, because we didn't get the message, I didn't arrange it, we can't do it, and then at the next Board of Supervisors meeting, we appoint, where we never had a chance to speak with the gentleman.
Dana Hogan?
Brian, did I hear Brian seconded the motion? Because I thought last month he recused himself from a discussion as a result of being an IDA board member. It doesn't feel appropriate.
No, this is different.
This is
This
different.
is just like our normal January meeting where a person they put up their people, we put up our people,
Do
and
you
whoever we
feel as an
decide.
IDA board member that you should be doing that? I get by your pause, you probably don't. You probably should let somebody else second and abstain from voting on the matter.
I can do that, I would say.
You've got a quorum, yeah.
Do I have somebody else who wants to second the motion? Seeing none, I guess the motion doesn't carry through today. Is choice of the committee that we try and arrange to have the gentleman come in and speak at another committee before the board meeting?
Yes.
Matt?
I thoroughly oppose that idea for lots of reasons. That's never been the process in the past. It's their appointment. I wouldn't want them to be doing it to our appointments. If someone has a question for an appointee between now and our board meeting a month from now, call the guy, contact the guy, have lunch with the guy, sit down and get your answers. But I don't think a formal process is the way to handle this because it just opens up a Pandora's box. And I'm really disappointed that we're not gonna at least get a second to discuss this so we can move on and get a resolution one way or the other. We're gonna stay in limbo for another month? Come on.
Dana Haff first, then Brian.
Matt, just because that's how we've always done it in the past does not make it right. This appointment is not a Warren County appointment. It's a joint appointment. This is the joint Warren and Washington IDA. Whoever lives in Warren County and serves on the board, they represent us just as much as they represent that county. That's why it's important that we interview people so that they realize this, the nominee. They realize that they just can't say, oh, that's a Washington County thing. Let the Washington County guys decide and we'll just go along how they want to go. It's a joint appointment legally. That means a lot different than, okay, you get your guy, we get our guy, and we rubber stamp each other. We've seen all kinds of things going on with the solar consortium and everything else where we're really concerned about intrusion, and we're seriously not going to speak to somebody who we have.
You're not precluded from speaking to him, Danny. You can speak to him anytime you like.
Brian?
Well, I think this is the first time this has ever come from a committee, so I'm not upset if we don't have a second. I think it's probably the chairman's appointment anyway. Roger says no, it's not.
Not in this case. They've always been appointed by resolution.
Because it's, right, but it's always come from the chairman, never from a committee, because it comes in the January meeting. It always comes, the supervisor or the chairman has all the names from both counties.
But it's been a board vote, this is my point.
And it's a board vote, right, and it still will be a board vote, no matter when it happens, or how it happens. It's gonna be a board vote, but it's always come from the chairman, so I guess I don't quite understand. You've never even interviewed any of us to be on it, and frankly, I don't see where a lot of people would think this was a gratifying role to play. I see it as doing my duty because I was asked to do it. I think if you put a lot of these people through the interview process, they're gonna say, why the hell am I gonna bother with that? And you have a lot of people that aren't supervisors just devoting their time, and some of them are extremely good. And no reason why they couldn't be or shouldn't be or wouldn't be better than some of us, especially from some of the, backgrounds they come from. So I would suggest we do it the way we've been doing it, and if you want to have discussions with them, have discussions with them. But I don't think we should preempt Warren County's ability to put people on, and I think that's really what we're doing, is trying to control Warren County. And I'm not really interested in trying to control their county. I'm trying to look out for our own, as you can see from the meetings we've had.
Any further discussion? Okay. I guess that goes back to you, Sam, and how you want to handle it.
Well, I think if they want to change the procedure, there's a way to doing this, not at this meeting necessarily, okay? I guess the thing that, going back to history, as Brian had said, this has been a situation where normally the hometown rule applies, if you will. So we want to use the hometown rule as to our advantage, but now it's to somebody else's advantage. That's number one. And number two, this never became an issue until this year when a certain individual that somebody wanted appointed didn't make the appointment process in Warren County. All right? So I think there's underlying things here. It's not all about what we're being told today. I think that Warren County has the responsibility for that. It's their appointment. I can't remember anywhere in the past. And I can, certainly one of those individuals who believes in we don't have to do things the way we have in the past. But there's never been a precedent set for the fact that we were going to undermine one of their appointees that they had the opportunity to appoint. They've never asked to interview any of our candidates, and this is the first that I'm aware that we've ever asked to interview any of theirs. So unless we have a real bona fide reason outside of it's not the guy that I wanted, I think we should go ahead with the process the way we have.
Okay.
Everybody has a chance to vote on the floor.
So we want to just move it back to the floor again on
Move
Friday?
back to the floor.
Okay. Works for me. Matt Hicks?
Okay, the second series of questions are for you, I think. So we have two board members here, including the chairman. And I just want to get a basis on some answers, and it's all about Lockgate Way. So hopefully you can kind of clear up a few things. Can I assume that the EPA has transferred Lockgate Way, or what portion they owned of it, to the IDA at this point?
Yes, we are in possession of those documents.
Okay, and was there also a small purchase of some Canal Corp property that was supposed to be transferred from Canal Corp to the IDA?
Yes, we are also in possession of those documents.
Okay, so,
Well,
there's possession of documents, there's deeds, and then there's filing of deeds. I just want to get a clarification where we stand on everything.
I had an update
I'm
last
sorry,
night on Apple Triangle.
I'm not there yet, Dave. Okay, so where are we, Kara, on actual, the APA owns it, IDA owns it?
We have the deeds. We're waiting to we just got our subdivision approval recently for the other parts involved. And so the plan is, you know, we would want to file everything together. We do have the deed. As far as the EPA and the Canal Corp are concerned, we are the owners of those properties.
Okay, so the third question is Mary Webb property that came from WCC. What's the process there? Is that something that's been transferred and you have the deeds on that too?
We have been provided with draft documents. Right now, we're in discussions with WCC concerning the easement language over that, for the road that they will require. So we're working, we met with them last week. We continue to work with them on that particular piece of it. There was an easement agreement that was prepared when WL was still in the process. So now there's just some modifications that we want to address at this point with them.
Okay, so you don't have that deed yet then, right?
No.
Okay. And then there are two small triangular parcels sort of at the elbow of the road that are sort of WCC oriented too. It's my understanding they need to be subdivided out of the WCC parcel so that you could acquire them. So that's got to go through the town of Fort Edward Planning Board, I assume. Can you just give me an idea on where that process is and when it will potentially be completed?
Sure. That we have that approval. That approval was in place. I guess it's been maybe 2 or 3 weeks now. Time seems to go quick. I believe it was the first part of August 7th. I want to say we were in front of the planning board. It might have been the following week, but we were in front of the planning board then. That's when we received our final subdivision approval. So our subdivision approval is contingent only on to be sure that we get all the parcels together.
So have the parcels been subdivided and approved by the Fort Edward Planning Board?
Yes.
The subdivisions have been approved?
Yes. I think it,
Okay. And so those parcels have to be created and transferred to IDA?
I'm sorry?
So those two little triangular parcels have to be created because they've been subdivided and then they will be transferred to the IDA?
Yeah, that is the plan, that those parcels, they've been subdivided off the approvals, but I mean, we haven't filed the map yet. It's been finalized. I don't know if the map yet has gone to. Yeah.
Okay. And then the last parcel is about 6/100 of an acre, which is a little strip between Blockade Way and the FLPDC property that's owned by the town of Fort Edward. Will that be subdivided out also and then turned over to the IDA?
Yes, that part was part of our original subdivision application. That's part of the approval process. And I'm working with the town attorney on those documents.
When would you assume that those Fort Edward pieces and the two little triangular pieces would be deeded to them? Is that a month from now, 2 months from now, by the end of the year? What was your best guess?
I'm not really sure. I think, you know, it's a matter of getting everything together, getting the easement language together, getting everyone on board. I would say, I don't foresee there being that we wouldn't have everything together by the, you know, the first part of the year. I don't, you know, I don't want to say, I mean, I don't want to speak to that. I guess it's just as quick as everybody can get everything together and reviewed. I know the town has to follow its process as well, to have that parcel conveyed out. And like I said, we're working with WCC on the easement language.
Okay, so things are still in limbo. There's still a lot of roadblocks from 196 to the FLPDC property, but things are in process and they're happening, but we don't really know a time frame on when that's all going to be resolved, so you have durable access from 196 to the FLPDC property, correct?
Yeah, I don't want to give you a firm time frame. I mean, we thought we were going to be closing on WL this week, so things changed. So
Lori Chadwick, you wanted to add something?
I don't have a mic, but Kara, do those maps need to be filed within 60 days of approval from the Fort Edward Planning Board?
60 days from the date that it's signed, that's when we have to get it on. But I think the survey map has been circulated and it's I'm dealing with somebody, I think it's Jim Hudson at the town from CT Mail. He's reviewed it. I believe he's in the process of signing off on that, and then it'll be delivered to the county chairman to have signed and stamped so we could get that on file.
Okay, within 60 days from when they stamp the map then?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Since we're getting an update today on sort of the lay of the land currently, might I request that someone from the IDA, maybe the chairman, on a monthly basis in your committee, Cassie, just update us on this has been filed, this needs to be taken care of, so we have a progress, we don't find out 5 months from now we're in the same spot we are right now.
Sure.
If that's
Between
not
Kara
too big
and
a
Dave,
request.
you guys can give us an update.
Sure.
Thank you. Anything else? Oh, I'm sorry, Dana. Hogan, you're first.
Hey, Cassie, I've heard of just a couple references to subdivisions. Can I just confirm there's been no change to the Fort Edward Local Property Development Corporation portion of the property? Is that correct? Nothing's changed there?
They still own everything that they owned when we first got involved in this process. Their parcel was eliminated from the subdivision application, our subdivision application, for 2 reasons. One, we didn't need it any longer because WL wasn't coming, so it wasn't necessary to have that additional space or additional access. And 2, we wouldn't be able to get the subdivision finalized because we wouldn't be able to get the map on record because of the outstanding taxes. But as far as so everything that they own is remaining there. To my knowledge, that we're not, we aren't, I know, we're not involved in any acquisition from Fort Edward LPDC, we being the IDA.
Quick follow-up. What is the current tax amount due? Is Al with us right now? Does anybody know that number?
I don't believe Al's with us.
900?
Al gave me the numbers. I want to say it's, off my head, is $900,000 plus I think $50,000 due to the village. And find the numbers here in a second, hopefully.
Well, Dave's looking for the numbers.
Go on parcel 1. Is at the town cost is $495,199.96. Parcel 2 is $467,664.95. That's the village parcel plus $52,514 in village tax. That's the latest I got from him.
Thanks, Cassie.
Anything else, Dana Hogan? Okay. Dana Haas?
Question is for Lester Losaw. The parcel that's owned by the Fort Edward Local Property Development Corporation, Lester, do you know if any request for subdivision came before Fort Edward Town Planning Board? Because they owe taxes. My understanding is you cannot subdivide a property that taxes are owed upon.
That's my understanding also, but nobody has approached me about subdividing.
Thank you.
The only, to be clear, the only subdivision was taking place in WL Plastics. That's since been terminated.
Any other questions for the IDA discussion?
Yeah, Cassie, I just want to say that since Dave just, gave us numbers over $1 million, there's obviously quite a concern at the county level of what's happening down there. And that's basically my request on, please keep us updated month to month on the status of these things so we see progress that in the end, we've got our $1 million back somehow. But, there's a lot of moving parts here, and certainly it'd be in our best interest if we all knew the status of things on a regular basis so we know where we stand.
Thank you.
I do want to correct one thing. The Small Canal Corp. Triangle, they lost the deed that I signed. They found it apparently on Friday, and it's coming up here, so I didn't want to have a misperception. We already had it signed off by Canal Corp.
Bill, that's not part of Block 8 Way, but that's your point, right?
Canal Corp is part of Lock.
It is part of Block 8 Way?
A little triangle, yes. That's that little triangle between WCC and WCC.
Okay.
The one that you purchased.
Well, we purchased.
Yes, the ones that are being transferred to you at no cost, so you have to purchase the Canal Corp one, correct?
Yes.
All right. Laura Oswald, do you have anything today that's outside of IDA?
Of course I do.
I figured you did, and I saw Andrew Meter pop in, but I figured you could throw him under the bus when you were ready.
All right, so, a few odds and ends updates, and then we'll, get to tourism. I wanted to give you a quick update on census. As you know, we decided to accept the state census funding. We have, all the contracts have been signed, the contract with United Way, with the state. We're actually expecting that funding to be deposited either today or tomorrow. Work has, basically started, now that the contracts are signed, but we've still got the money to actually be transferred. And I also would like to point out, again, just emphasizing why the census is so important. If you look at the devastation and flooding that happened in Whitehall today, you have to assume that Whitehall is ultimately going to be seeking funding to start mitigating some of that damage. Right now, Whitehall's participation rate is below 50%, and if we can't count people up there, it will impact their ability to get funding. So the more everybody can do to encourage census participation, the better for everyone. Nationally, right now, the participation rate is at 64.4%. The state is at 60.3%, and the county is at 58.2%. So as we start these marketing programs, the target is clearly to get that needle ratcheted up a little bit so that we, at the very least, achieve what we did in the last decennial census, which was, I think, about 62%, but clearly we'd like to see it a lot higher than that. Just wanted to give you a quick update on unemployment. Again, these are June's figures. The July figures won't be out till later this week. The state is at 15.5% in June. I do have July numbers for them. The state actually ticked upwards in July, but I don't have our numbers. We were at 9.8%. I also want to point out Warren County is 11.6%. I think that just really underscores the importance of tourism to the Warren County economy. So obviously, as COVID continues, that's going to continue to impact our employment numbers. Just a quick thing on broadband. There were some discussions, I think it was about 2 years ago, revolving around the potential use of our fire towers to deploy broadband equipment. Hudson Valley Wireless contacted me and said, you know, even as an emergency temporary use, if we have any interest in reopening those discussions, then that might be a way to get additional broadband for schools and local use where we currently don't have any. So if anybody is sort of interested in opening that discussion again, you know, I'm not sure if it belongs to this committee or another one, but they've indicated they're more than happy to help in any way they can. Chris?
Just to clarify, you said fire towers. I'm assuming you mean our emergency communications radio towers?
Yeah, then are they on, I believe a lot of them are on state land, correct? There's like state communications on them?
We do have some state communications on some of ours, yes, but we own the land in general. Okay, I just want to make sure we're on the same page.
Okay. In any case, whether they're ours or anybody else's, what Hudson Valley Wireless is saying is even on a temporary basis, if, you know, we know that deployment from Broadband for All has been a lot slower than we had hoped, even in areas where it's still coming, in order to get help for schools, et cetera, if there's a way to even set up something temporary, then there should be conversations about that.
So we have 4 towers, Chris?
Here, hold back, first, order, and then we use the fine, that's not ours. I know we have issues on one about load, can't really put any note on that, but I can have a conversation with them.
So I mean, really, it's the Hebron, Cambridge areas, the areas you help, right, which would be the Salem and Cambridge school districts, maybe the Greenville school district. I'm just trying to see what
vendor and say, go
No,
ahead.
God,
You got to procure a vendor to do that.
No, I would have talked to Tim and Glenn and the quality engineering, of course, to see what would be possible, then we would have to do some kind of an RFP.
I was just trying to see who we would actually be helping. It's basically the Salem, Granville, Cambridge school districts. Maybe Hartford. Just trying to.
Without looking, in general, yes, but you'd have to look at a propagation study.
Right.
What their signal
Yeah.
propagation would really be, to know.
I'm just trying to, because it doesn't involve a lot of places in the county, that's all I was looking at. It does help some that are very in dire need, but there's lots of places in the county that won't help. I guess that's where I was.
Yeah, I don't think that it has to be vendor specific. I think the point of the conversation was, for whatever reasons, the use of the fire towers didn't work a couple of years ago, and given the emergency situation, it might be worth bringing them back into discussion.
So Laura, going back to the broadband for all conversation, refresh our memory on when it started and what their deadlines were, and I've had questions out of my town as when they received payment for the areas, like if Verizon was awarded areas in Cambridge, did they get paid up front, or are they paid after the work is complete? Because wasn't it a grant type situation?
So basically, the Broadband for All program was an auction to providers who bid it. So yes, the funding does not go to the municipalities, it goes to the providers. Payments, because this is the way every other grant works, I'm reasonably certain that it was remitted, it might have been remitted in interim payments, or it was entire reimbursements. I'm not really sure. I'd have to go back and review the contract, but they weren't paid upfront.
And has any of the deadlines been changed, given the COVID crisis and the redirection of the companies where they're more trying to help schools and whatnot initially, and is it slowing down, or have they been given an extension for the amount of time for their build-out?
I think a number of things have slowed down the deployment overall. The largest impact has basically been utility poles. It's the length of time that it's taken. Basically, all the utility pole owners have sort of tried to take this as an opportunity to get those broadband companies that were awarded funding to replace their poles. That took a long time, but largely the broadband providers are not typically replacing the utilities poles. The utilities have to do it. But because they're then waiting for the utilities to do it or upgrade the poles or whatever it might be, it has slowed things. The other thing is, there was language in the original awards that said that basically everything had to be completed by 2019. However, there was a clause in all those contracts that said, as a provider, all you have to do is ask for a 2-year extension and we'll grant it to you. So pretty much every provider requested that extension. Yeah. They're all trying to move faster, but technically they still have another year.
Thank you. Mm-hmm. Any other questions, Matt?
I have an assumption, and I need to tell me whether I'm off base or not. So, from what I understand, there are satellite services, and there are tiers of satellite services. I had someone in my town who wanted to use it, and they bought the $50 a month package, and they could basically get email, but they couldn't download movies and do lots of other things. Mm-hmm. I had a business who bought the $150 a month package because they wanted to do business, and it worked for them quite well, and it was worth it to them because they're running a business.
Right.
Where if you're a husband, wife, and a child, $150 a month is quite a burden. Right. If someone throughout Washington County was willing to pay that extra money to buy the tier $350 level, could they then get pretty reasonable broadband pretty much anywhere in Washington County? If they bought the top-end satellite service?
So, first of all, going back to the beginning of that, you have to remember that any of the providers who bid and were awarded broadband for all funding, so, HughesNet got a lot of awards in the area. There's a certain protocol, and I don't have all the numbers, but there's specific download speeds, upload speeds, data amounts, and the set price, which I think was $49.59, something like that. It was a monthly price that they had to keep to for a certain number of years. So if anybody, for example, a new resident is in an area that was awarded HughesNet, and they are signing up for the regular internet and not getting adequate speeds, then HughesNet is not delivering what they're obligated to deliver. If they're going to a satellite company that wasn't part of the award, then those satellite companies can charge whatever they want.
Right, but you would have an opportunity, if you're willing to pay for it, to
Yes.
get pretty good speeds. I'm just thinking, 6 months ago, it wouldn't have been worth it from a cost-benefit analysis. But now, if, A, I'm working from home, and 2 of my kids now are all of a sudden gonna be getting most of their work via broadband, it might be worth $125 a month for me to pay for those additional speeds and that. Is that always available to anybody from a satellite standpoint?
Okay, so if you go on to, we have a link on the planning webpage, which is a link to the state broadband for all. These are the providers that are available to your area. There are 2 or 3 satellite companies that probably most of us are not familiar with because they weren't part of all of that programming, and there's a couple of companies that just launched a whole bunch of new satellites. So yes, there are multiple satellite companies. Will everybody in the county ultimately, if they pay the right price, have access to broadband? No. Because if satellite is your only option and you don't have line of sight, there are going to be certain places in the county where you're not even going to be able to access satellite.
There's a restricted line of sight between your house and a satellite?
It's not line, there is some technological where, so for example, the Hudson Valley Wireless and the ground, yes, those have to have line of sight. But my understanding is even the satellites, there are some geographic locations, like if you're in a deep canyon or something.
It would be infinitesimal percentage.
Well, it is few and far between,
Okay.
but
Right.
there will be some.
I just want people to know that I know it's expensive and it costs way more than you should, but if your circumstances have changed and you're willing to invest in your child's education, you do have the option to pay more to get more.
Yes.
If that's your only option. So it's out there if you have to
And
have it.
if anybody wants to look, again, the links to it are on the planning webpages under broadband. What happens is you type in your address, and New York State will come up with a list of these are the providers who will currently serve you. And there, in many cases, are several different satellite
Thank you.
companies, and they can just contact them directly.
Gotcha, thank you.
Brian?
So, to your point, which is very interesting, I've had neighbors where the satellite company is there to set up the satellite dish, and their neighbor's tree has to be cut for you to get service, and that neighbor isn't one that cuts their tree. So yes, it
There
does
are
happen,
instances where
it does happen when satellite cannot reach you. So it's according to how
There's
big.
always anecdotal issues,
Right.
I'm saying in general.
So it's according to what the footprint is around your property, yeah, so
Okay.
if
So I wanna
you
know.
own just an acre and your house is in the center of it, but the trees are on the neighbors, you can't cut the neighbor's tree unless he says it's okay, so there can be significant problems according, and if it's in the village,
Again, I'm gonna assume that's a very, very, very small percentage of 1% that would get.
I hope you're right.
Okay.
Dana Matt?
Matt, it's more than you think. These satellites are over the equator. We're about 44° north latitude. Go look to the south, come up 44 degrees, and figure out, is there anything in your way? There's a lot of stuff in your way. Very easy to figure out. All right, is this committee kind of completely glossing over the fact that somebody has a request that they could do short-term improvement for broadband in areas, Hudson Valley Wireless? I know Paul Ferguson desperately needs it. Mount Defiance, is that Essex County? I don't think we own that, but I think Mount Defiance, would it get into Putnam and Dresden? Are we gonna act on this request? I think it could be a lease, short-term lease.
I think Chris said he was gonna have to get together with members of public safety and discuss whether or not it was possible and look at studies before we could reach out, and if it was possible, then we would take the next step.
Yeah, because you have to have separation between different antennas for the propagation not to interfere. I think that's the biggest thing. But what Roger Wicks was saying about, you know, you don't want to give out a lease to somebody and then freeze out everyone else because you no longer have a 15-foot separation on the antenna between other antennas. So it gets a little bit more complicated, but I think we're in a little bit of a urgency here with school starting. So I kind of hope that this doesn't die due to bureaucracy.
Dana, I can tell you that when we went up on Mount Defiance, somebody was like on the road, and it's pretty crowded as it is. It took us close to a year and a half to finalize our deal with the fort to get up there. And it's awful crowded as it is right now. We had some propagation issues ourselves going up there. So I wouldn't see that as a quick solution by any stretch of the imagination. We obviously don't own it. As far as the county towers go, we just have to do some kind of procurement to make sure that everybody has an equal, that provides that service. And I know there used to be at least one other service besides Hudson Valley. They use similar technology. I don't know if they're still around.
I believe they are.
You know, we'd have to, because it's a public asset, we'd have to ensure that we could, and we could give them something business, we'd have to ensure that we procure it the right way. In addition to not getting any kind of interference off what we're doing, and we also have tenants on some of our towers, so we'd have to make sure that propagation-wise, they have their first in rank, first in use, so that we don't have any problems with them. So it's not just a case, as I'm sure you know from what you used to do for a living, of bolting things onto a tower. It's gonna take a little bit of study.
Jim Griffith? Do you have a question?
No, I'm good. I was agreeing with Dana Happ.
Okay.
I don't know if it's shack.
Okay, any other questions concerning broadband? Seeing none. Next topic, Laura?
Okay, next topic, the solid waste management plan. Just to give you a little bit of history, in 2011, the county developed, Mike Gray actually spearheaded that, a solid waste management plan as required by New York State law. So the plan was written in 2011, there were a couple of public hearings, it's then supposed to go on to DEC, which it did, where it basically sat and then came back to us sometime in late 2018. Basically, DEC said it's incomplete and we're going to have to rework it. So we actually started trying to address this in 2019 because clearly the issue is we no longer own the responsibility for solid waste management. Everything was sold off. So it was impossible for us to use the plan written in 2011 because everything had changed. So we went back and forth with DEC multiple times. They are still requiring, because of state law, that we have a solid waste management plan. So essentially, we've developed a draft of a plan that, I'm going to call it a data dump. We collected as much data from the providers as we could. We inserted historical data from the county's record and essentially did what we could in order to give as much information about what has been collected, what the processes were, and what the current providers are doing. So the process from this point is that we need, as a county, to have a discussion about the draft plan. Now, earlier today, I sent everybody a link to where the plan is currently residing. I'm going to suggest that we bring the plan up for discussion in the September, either the ag planning meeting or the public works meeting, whichever everybody thinks is appropriate. But that way, everybody, all of the supervisors have a month to review what's there and comment on it. Once it's discussed at ag planning, we then will need to move it to DEC for final approval. They will then require that we have a 45-day public comment period, and at the end of that comment period, we would need a public hearing. So the likely timing on that would probably be November for a public hearing, assuming that we put it through committee in September. Then it goes back to DEC, and then there has to be a final hearing, and then the board has to adopt it. But the first next step is going to be some discussion and approval by committee of the plan itself so that we can officially put it out for public comment. So again, there's nothing to do today. I just want to make everybody aware it's posted. I sent everybody the link. I suggest you review it, and then we put it on the agenda for committee discussion at either ag planning or public works next month. Any questions about that?
Dana Haff? You're muted, Dana.
I do that all the time. I'm sorry. Laura, this used to live in DPW committee back when we had transfer stations. now that we don't have transfer stations, I don't know if maybe this is the proper committee. But are there other moving parts to this, like the waste hauler law that we no longer have? And there's a requirement to recycle, you know, your plastic number 5s and your glass and your metal. That's all part of the solid waste law too?
Yes, it's all addressed. But again, we aren't managing recycling processes. That's all handled by third-party providers now. So any data that could be collected and disseminated is in that plan. Obviously, they're privately held companies, so we only had access to what they were willing to give us. But any data and information that we have is contained in this plan.
But
Sorry?
I think the requirement to recycle is upon the homeowner, not who hauls it away. It's the requirement that in your kitchen, you separate material out. I think, I could be wrong.
Well, I think so. What we can do with this plan is basically provide information about tools and resources that are available for both committees and residents to use to encourage recycling and to encourage proper disposal of solid waste. But since we don't really control what happens to it, all we can do is make available information about best practices and, you know, make suggestions as to where to go to get information.
Right, so this new plan is going to be much smaller than the old plan.
It is definitely smaller. There's a
Thank
ton
you.
of appendices and some of the technical data, but the actual plan itself, there's not a lot of bulk to it because we can't plan around a process we don't own.
Thank you.
I will also tell you that Warren County just started the process on their plan. There was some pretty significant public input. But again, I think it's going to be a little bit different in our case because we don't own the process. Or we don't own they're privately held companies that are managing the solid waste management stream. So again, take a look at the data, take a look at the plan, and then I would encourage comment and discussion either at one of the 2 meetings next month.
Okay.
Anything else?
No hands, no questions.
Okay, so with that, some really, really good news. As you know, we have been discussing for many years the sort of, let's call it an unlevel playing field with Airbnb, in which they are not collecting taxes, but we have our local bed and breakfast and accommodations required to collect taxes. We have now formally executed an agreement with Airbnb in which they are going to be collecting these taxes on our behalf. They will begin collecting these fees as of September 1st, so it moved quite quickly. I would really like to very publicly thank Andrew Meter for making all of this happen. He worked really hard chasing all of the different, not just Airbnb, but we're also working with VRBO and some of the others, and it took quite a bit of work to make it happen, but he did. And I'm going to turn it over to Andrew to give us a little bit more information about how that's going to work going forward.
Thank you. Yeah, it was my pleasure to make it all happen. I think it's really going to help us, especially as we look down the road and see potential cuts in New York State funding. This may bridge that gap. So I just wanted to talk about, we are now purchasing data that gives us the statistics of Airbnb, of how many people are staying. And we saw some interesting things happen especially during the shutdown. And so I just wanted to speak to those statistics. Laura has the official, very detailed spreadsheet of all of these, but I just wanted to go over some highlights. So in April, nights booked year over year was 1,040. That's up 118% over last year. In May, it was 1,460 nights booked, which is up 43%. And in June, 1,897, which is 58% up over last year. And then July, we just got the numbers, is 2,133, which is only up 15%. But that's because the people, we're running out of rooms. Our occupancy for July was at 88% of available rooms, which is why we could only see that small growth. So speaking of occupancy, of the available rooms in April, 33% were booked. In May, 38%. In June, 50%. And in July, 64%. How that translate into revenue? April saw our hosts, our Airbnb hosts, collect $164,000. And in May, $258,000. In June, $416,000. And in July, over $500,000 at $570,000. That translates, if we were to be collecting the occupancy tax, which we will now, starting September 1st, that would equal $56,320 we would have collected in occupancy tax. That's an estimate because Airbnb's actual numbers may differ slightly from the numbers that we get through this data collection agency, but we can assume it's going to be somewhere around that number. So that allows us to forecast into September. And last year, our hosts collected $190,000 in gross revenue, and so the occupancy tax on that would be about $7,600. That would be in the month. I've reached out to Airbnb. We believe that the payments will happen monthly, but I've asked them to confirm that so that we can plan for that moving forward. Just going back to the census real quick, Black Dog and myself are working on that through Tri-County United Way. And just to ask all of you, if you have message boards in front of your offices or contacts with the schools, we would love to have you put, fill out the census. That's simple. Please fill out the census in as many public places as we possibly can. If you need help, with any of that, please contact me. But we've seen it in a lot of schools, and it's working in Warren County, so we'd like to do the same. I know Fort Edward has an electronic one that would be easy to do. So just wanted to throw that out there. If anybody has any changeable signage outside their town or government offices, that would be great. I'm happy to answer any questions on the Airbnb stuff.
Jim?
You're on mute.
Where are we on the VRBO agreement? If the committee doesn't remember, roughly Airbnb did $2 million worth of revenue. VRBO also did $2 million worth of revenue. I think their occupancy and layout's a little bit different in regards to they're going to get. I think they tend to be more in the northern part of the county, up in the up along the lakes region. So they're going to be more summertime based. But just wanted to find out, Andrew, where we were with VRBO and getting a similar agreement.
So VRBO has been known to be a little bit more difficult in trying to get these arrangements. They have them with far less at the county level. They seem to play ball when it's a state mandate or a state law that they have to collect it. So I'm having a hard time moving as quickly as we did with Airbnb. I think larger picture, my suggestion would be to, start moving forward on changing the county law so that it covers everything. And I think in going through that process, it'll also make us easier when I believe the state will make it a statewide law. But I think, I'm still trying and still going down that road. But I think in the meantime, as a county, we should be trying to adjust our law, which will make it faster when the state adjusts their law.
Follow up, is that state law going to be pushed on from like NISTA or another legislative? Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
It currently is, but you know how it works. It takes time.
Lobby days in March.
Yeah.
Matt Hess?
So Andrew, in a normal year, which I'm not sure we'll ever have anymore, but you said that there's about, between VRBO and Airbnb, about $4 million worth of rentals, and our rate is 4%?
That's
which
correct.
is $160,000.
Yes,
of budgeted of revenue that we didn't budget prior to this, correct?
correct.
Is that just general fund revenue or?
No.
It's restricted where?
First one's our tourism law. I would recommend you treat that as the same as our tourism law, which is promoting the there's a phrase that is used for it, but it's restricted.
Okay, so it's still up to our discretion as long as we stay within those parameters.
Yes. Yeah, you couldn't buy a carpool car with it unless it was being used by Laura to promote the county or.
All right, thank you.
It's a pretty broad definition, but there is a restriction.
Gotcha.
Laura's into that idea.
With the
other
other,
thing I want to point out is I think we're gonna need to get a year under our belt as all this works, because although even if they're remitting payments on a monthly basis, we don't know what it's gonna look like yet, so we can't really budget on these revenues until we've seen what it's really gonna look like, because
No, but my point was, professionals like you and Andrew and Krista understand this. As these revenues start to come in and increase, plan now to advise us on how those money should be
and
spent.
yes, we are doing that. We will have a discussion of that in September when we talk about the tourism budget.
All right, thanks.
Yes, Travis?
No prohibition against supplementation. So while these funds are reserved, there's nothing to say that we can't use these funds to offset what used to be general funds, unrestricted funds toward tourism.
Towards tourism, okay.
So there will be some relief to general fund, but in 20 years, this income stream is $1 million. You can't offset your other general operating expenses.
Jim, did you have another comment?
yeah, there's an unknown with I Love New York, right, Laura, in regards to what that's going to look like in 2021, 2022, and 2023?
So what has happened for 2020, just as a reminder, they have agreed to pay Q1 expenses. They haven't done it yet. It's reimbursement's all been submitted. We haven't seen the money. So the language was very fuzzy on Q2 expenses, and I think we can completely write off Q3 and Q4. There has not been any specific discussion related to I Love New York and tourism funding for 2021. However, given that there's sort of a general consensus that a lot of state budgets are just going to get reduced by 20%, at this point, for budgeting purposes and making the assumption that I Love New York is highly likely to cut that budget by 20%, but we just don't know.
Okay. What's next?
That's
Do you
all
have
I have.
anything else, Laura?
That's it.
Does anybody else have anything to come before the Ag and Planning Committee today? Okay. Seeing none, motion to adjourn. Have a nice day.
Yeah, you hit the red button.
Oh, boy. Good little boy.